Top stories for today, August 24, 2020. The Senate assures a hiring of health workers and contact tracers and other benefits under Bayanihan 2 Act. Defense Chief Delfin Lorenzana rebuffs China's claims that the Philippines is causing provocations in the West Philippine Sea. Rescuers continue to search for 3 fishermen lost at sea in Batanes. And a charity volunteer in Cagayan province is named a finalist in Hong Kong's 2020 Volunteer Movement Award. Good day, I am Rom Dulfo. Welcome to PNA Newsroom. The hiring of health workers and contact tracers are now provided under the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act or Bayanihan 2. The DOH says around 5,100 health personnel have been recruited as of June, and they are looking forward to hire 4,200 more. Senate Committee on Finance Chair Sonia Angara says Bayanihan 2 ensures continuity in the government's response to the pandemic. Total funding for Bayanihan 2 amounts to 165.5 billion pesos, out of which 140 billion represents regular appropriations and 25.5 billion are standby funds. Around 40.5 billion pesos would go to health-related programs. This includes 13.5 billion pesos for the continuous employment and hiring of emergency human resource for health, augmentation for operations of DOH hospitals, special risk allowance for public and private health workers, free life insurance, accommodation, transportation, and meals for health workers, and compensation for health workers who contract COVID-19 or die while fighting the pandemic. The Bayanihan 2 bill ratified by the Congress will be submitted to Malacanang for President Duterte's approval and enactment into law. Efforts of a pro-Duterte group to establish a revolutionary government has been brushed aside, saying it will only matter if there is an overwhelming call from the public. Chief Presidential Legal Counsel Sal Panelo says the call of a revolutionary government must come from the people and not from a single organization or an individual. The People's National Coalition for Revolutionary Government and Charter Change earlier called for the establishment of a revolutionary government and the adoption of a new federal constitution. Panelo described it as an idea pregnant with repercussion, saying the society might not even be ready for a revolutionary government. He recognized that President Rodrigo Duterte himself threatened to impose a revolutionary type of government, but it was only due to alleged plots to oust him. With or without a revolutionary government, Panelo emphasized that President Duterte is already carrying out necessary changes in the country. Meanwhile, Malacanang distanced itself from the issue, saying the administration's focus remains to be on COVID-19 response. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque explained that the call to establish a revolutionary government came from a private group and not the government. He said the government is too busy finding ways to cushion the socioeconomic impact of the lockdowns that arise from the prevailing health crisis. The Department of Trade and Industry assures support for local PPE manufacturers as it already coordinated with the Department of Health and the Department of Budget and Management, or DBM, in the procurement of Philippine-made personal protective equipment. The DTI says it is already anticipating the passage of Bayanihan 2 into law, as well as on aligning PPE demand requirements, timing of procurement, and flow of production. DTI Secretary Ramon Lopez says their department has always been pushing for patronizing local manufacturers in sourcing PPE, as this will help in saving jobs for Filipinos and Philippine-based firms. Earlier, the Confederation of Philippine Manufacturers of PPE, or CPMP, said one of the local industry's key challenge is getting the demand from the government, as up to 99% of the government's PPE requirements are being served by imported products, mostly coming from China. CPMP says locally produced PPE have undergone inspection by the Food and Drug Administration and passed the highest testing standard done by international testing laboratories, unlike imported PPEs that are not being tested when it arrived in the Philippines. The government assures the business community that its focus is not only on saving lives from the COVID-19 pandemic, but also from hunger and other diseases. According to Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez III, the government is fully aware that fighting COVID-19 should be done alongside efforts to rebuild the economy. He says we cannot fight a pandemic with a weak economy, nor can we restore economic vigor without solving the public health crisis. Dominguez lauded private sector employers for their own brand of heroism as they continue to shore up businesses and help their employees survive in this time of crisis. As for the government, Dominguez said it will continue to be judicious in its use of its fiscal and financial resources. Even though the Philippines may not have one of the biggest economic stimulus packages when compared to other countries, Dominguez says it has performed better compared to some economies owing to its fiscal strength. Dominguez says the economy can recover if the country can keep the pandemic at bay so that tough restrictions such as wide-scale lockdowns are no longer necessary. The Department of National Defense maintains the provocations in the hotly disputed areas in the South China Sea are coming from the Chinese, who have illegally occupied some features within the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ. This as China claims that the Philippines is doing illegal provocations by sending its patrol aircraft over the Spratlys and reefs occupied by Chinese forces. Defense Chief Delfin Lorenzana says the area is within our EEZ and their so-called historical rights over an area enclosed by their 9-dash line doesn't exist except in their imaginations. Lorenzana says Philippine aircraft and ships conducting patrol sorties are doing so within the country's EEZ, just like Filipino fishermen going about with their lawful business. The Department of Foreign Affairs earlier lodged a diplomatic protest against China over the illegal confiscation of some Filipino fishermen's equipment at the Scarborough Shoal by the Chinese Coast Guard in May. It also slammed China's continuing illicit issuances of radio challenges on Philippine aircraft conducting legitimate regular maritime patrols in the West Philippine Sea. Still to come, DOJ Secretary Bernardo Guevara calls on churches and religious leaders to help stop the increase in suicides during the COVID-19 pandemic. Rescuers continue to search for 3 fishermen lost at sea in Batanes. More on these with the PNA Newsroom continues.
Sa matinding laban natin sa Coronavirus Disease 2019, sugpuin din natin ang pagkalat ng fake news. Huwag magbahagi ng impormasyon na hindi tiyak ang pinagmulan. I-check mabuti ang source ng balita. Kumuha lamang ng impormasyon mula sa mga official channel ng Department of Health. Huwag magpadala sa maling balita, basta't sama-sama at laging handa. Kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito. Alamin ang tamang paraan ng pag-ubo upang mapigilan ang paglaganap ng Coronavirus Disease 2019. Ugaliing magdala ng panyo o tissue. Kung uubo o babahing, takpan ang buong ilong at bibig gamit ang panyo o tissue. Kung walang dalang panyo o tissue, maaaring gamitin ang braso na pantakip. Kung nakararamdam na kailangan umubo o bumahing, agad na dumistansya sa mga tao sa paligid. Huwag dumura kung saan-saan, gumamit ng tissue at itapon sa basurahan. Ugaliin ang paghuhugas ng kamay at paggamit ng alcohol o hand sanitizer upang mamatay ang mikrobyo. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
You're still watching the PNA Newsroom. Thank you for joining us. The National Task Force Against COVID-19 is alarmed by the increase of the number of suicides during months the world is grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic. DOJ Secretary Bernardo Guevara says he received a phone call from Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr., Chief Implementer of the IATF National Task Force, regarding the alarming increase in the number of suicides during this pandemic time. Guevara sought the help of the churches and spiritual leaders in providing counsel and guidance to their members and followers who are undergoing depression due to loss of employment or livelihood, anxiety of being afflicted with or dying from the dreaded disease, loneliness arising from isolation, and lack of hope for a return to their normal lives. He said the government's call has been forwarded to all religious groups. Search and rescue operations continue for 3 missing fishermen in Batanes who have gone missing since Thursday last week. The 3 missing fishermen are identified as Antonio Lizardo, Eduardo Elica, and Tinong Alviso. They were last seen by fellow fishermen near the islands of Itbayat and Cagayan north of Basco, heading towards Mavulis Island near Taiwan. They should have been back to the port in Batanes on Saturday evening. The search was also joined by the Marines of the Philippine Navy and Civilian Armed Forces Geographical Unit. Aerial search will be conducted once the weather improves. Over 5,000 agrarian reform beneficiaries are expected to benefit with the turnover of a 32.4 million peso farm-to-market road in Godod, Zamboanga del Norte. Agrarian Reform Zamboanga Peninsula Regional Director Ramon Madronial says the turnover road project covers 5.28 kilometers between barangays Poblacion and Baluno. He said beneficiaries now have an efficient road access to transport their goods to various markets and trading centers. Aside from providing them access to transport their agricultural goods to the market, DAR would also support the establishment of agribusiness enterprises by promoting linkages between and among the agrarian reform communities of the 2 barangays. Godod Mayor Abel Matildo meanwhile thanked the DAR, saying that the project would greatly benefit the farmers and will have a positive impact on their municipality. The Philippine Army has teamed up with TESDA in Lanao del Norte to aid potential trainers of livelihood skills who will in turn teach indigents and former rebels in the province. More on this from Christine Lin Viajante.
The Technical Education and Skills Development Authority jumpstarts its Training of Trainers program today in Lanao del Norte. This is to address the need of trainers in far-flung hinterlands.
So after the completion of the training, they're in situ. This is a prerequisite to get the National TV Trainer Certificate. Ititrain sila ng TESDA, i-issuehan sila ng National TV Trainer Certificate. So with that, after having those papers in situ, the TMC, the Trainers Methodology Certificate, and the NTTC, pwede na silang itatap ng TESDA to become trainers.
TESDA aims to provide skills to the indigenous people, former rebels, and the less fortunate living in remote areas in the province and Iligan City. The Iligan City Police Office as well as the 554th Engineer Battalion participate in the training. Both teams will undergo electrical installation, photovoltaic system installation, and plumbing, while women from the 55th Engineer Brigade will be trained in driving. The 42nd Mechanized Infantry Company, on the other hand, will enhance their skills in organic agriculture production.
Gusto naming matuto ng organic farming kasi gusto naming i-share sa mga taong lalong-lalo na dito sa nasasakupan namin. No? May mga areas kasi tayo dito na lalo yung mga malalayo, nagfa-farming din sila. But then, hindi pa sapat yung kaalaman nila tungkol sa farming. We are willing to help them to develop and then syempre, not only for peace, but then yun nga, sabi namin, iahon din namin sila sa kahirapan.
More or less 120 competent men and women from the Philippine National Police and the Philippine Army started their training of different national certificate skills today as a prerequisite to acquire the National Technical Vocational Education and Training or TVET National Trainer Certificate. TESDA said it aims to train more trainers so that more people will also be trained in return. For PNA Newsroom, Christine Lin Viajante of PIA Iligan City Information Center.
In our business news, flag carrier Philippine Airlines will increase its services to the cities of Cagayan de Oro and Pagadian this month. PAL spokesperson Shelo Villaluna said daily flights between Manila and CDO will begin on August 24 while maintaining the CDO Cebu flights thrice weekly. Starting August 25, flights to Pagadian via Manila will have 5 flights a week, adding 2 more flights from the current 3 times weekly services. Villaluna said PAL will gradually add flights to other domestic destinations to serve the demand for flights across PAL's domestic route network. Meanwhile, local carriers urged passengers to check their destination's local government requirements as these may vary in every location. All local carriers also require passengers to wear face shields aside from face masks to board the flights. Up next, the Philippine Army expresses support for the investigation of the killing of Negrense activist Zara Alvarez. And charity volunteer in Cagayan province is named a finalist in Hong Kong's 2020 Volunteer Movement Award. The PNA Newsroom returns after these reminders.
Tandaan ang tamang paraan ng paghuhugas at paglilinis ng kamay upang makaiwas sa iba't ibang karamdaman. Basain ng tubig ang mga kamay at sabunin. Unang sabunin ang mga palad at ang likod ng mga kamay. Kuskusin na maigi ang pagitan ng mga daliri at maging ang mga kuko. Isunod ang pagitan ng mga hinlalaki at kuskusin ng paikot ang mga dulo ng mga daliri sa magkabilang palad. Banlawang mabuti ang mga kamay sa malinis na tubig at patuyuin ang mga kamay gamit ang single-use towel o air dryer. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito. Alamin kung paano ang tamang pagsusuot ng surgical mask. Una, hawakan ang mask sa strap at siguruhin natatakpan nito ang inyong bibig at ilong. Tandaan, ang may kulay na bahagi ng mask ang dapat nasa labas. Ito lamang ang tamang paraan ng pagsuot nito. Ihulma ang nose piece o maliit na metallic strip ayon sa hugis ng inyong ilong. Iwasan ang paghawak sa inyong ilong at bibig. Kung marumi na ang mask, hubarin ito gamit ang strap at itapon ito sa isang basurahan. Siguruhin ang maayos na paghuhugas ng kamay gamit ang sabon at tubig. Ang surgical mask ay dapat gamitin ng mga pasyenteng may sakit sa baga o mga taong mayroong ubo, sipon at lagnat, mga nag-aalaga sa mga may sakit, at mga healthcare at frontline workers. Maaari ring magsuot nito kung kayo ay pupunta sa matataong lugar. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
The Philippine Army's 3rd Infantry Division has expressed full support to the investigation on the slaying of Negrense human rights activist Zara Alvarez. In a statement, 3ID Commander Major General Eric Vinoya said the Army condemns the killing of Alvarez in Bacolod City on August 17. Vinoya said they fully support the investigation and welcome any information that would enlighten them about the incident. Alvarez, a member of Karapatan, was gunned down by an unidentified assailant in Iroreco Subdivision, Barangay Mandalagan. Earlier, Malacanang condemned the slay of Alvarez and fellow activist Randall Echanes, which happened within just a week, but said that blaming state forces for their deaths is unfounded. Echanes, a peasant leader and peace consultant of the National Democratic Front, was found dead in his rented house in Novaliches, Quezon City on August 10. A top military official has welcomed the mass surrender of nearly 200 New People's Army rebels and supporters in the Cagayan region amid intensified efforts to end the local communist insurgency. Marita Muahe with more.
About 174 Communist New People's Army members and supporters from Agusan del Norte and Agusan del Sur surrendered to the military. Brigadier General Maurito Licudine, commander of the Army's 402nd Infantry Brigade, held the 23rd and 26th Infantry Battalions, indigenous peoples communities, and the local government units of Caraga in their intensified campaign against the NPA under the Regional Task Force in Ending Local Communist Armed Conflict. He said the Army vows to relentlessly pursue the remaining communist NPA terrorists and assist those who surrender to become productive members of society. In Aurora Province, the Army is stepping up its information and education campaign to counter the recruitment efforts of the CPP-NPA among the youth. The 91st Infantry Battalion spearheaded a series of symposiums and dialogues with the youth to prevent communist terrorist groups from infiltrating the young sector. For his part, Wheeler Pascua, president of the Youth for Peace Cagayan in Maria Aurora, called on his fellow youths to support government programs designed to develop their sector and not be swayed by the communist movement. In Zambales, a soldier died while nearly 200 families from an Aita community were displaced following a clash between government troops and communist rebels in this province. The gun battle between the army troops and alleged members of the NPA broke out in Sitio Lumibao in Barangay Buhawen. Slain was Sergeant Rudy Dila of the Army's 73rd Division Reconnaissance Company, 7th Infantry Division. Meanwhile, the displaced indigenous peoples were temporarily evacuated at a covered court in Barangay Aglao, where they were given food and medical services. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Marita Muaje.
A military general paid homage to victims of terrorist attacks in the Philippines on August 20 ahead of the 3rd International Day of Victims of Terrorism. In the live radio broadcast of Usapang Pangkapayapaan, Usapang Pangkaunlaran, Pilipinas, Major General Ernesto Torres, Chief of the AFP Civil Relations Service, remembered and honored all the victims of terrorism. In marking this day, the Philippines joins the rest of the world in supporting victims of terrorism. Torres cited the numerous terrorist attacks that the country faced over the years. Among them were the massacre of 40 churchgoers by the NPA in Indigo City in 1989, the 2019 bombing at the Jolo Cathedral by the Abu Sayyaf and ISIS, and the ambush of NPA rebels in 2017 that killed a police officer and a 4-month-old baby in Bukidnon. In a separate forum, Lieutenant General Antonio Parlade Jr., commander of the Southern Luzon Command, counted those who died in the NPA purges in the 80s and 90s as victims of terrorism who should be remembered. In sports, UST men's basketball coach Alden Ayo finally broke his silence on Sunday night on the transfer of former Growling Tigers team captain CJ Cancino. In a statement, Ayo admitted that there were marked differences between him and Cancino that eventually led to the latter transferring to the University of the Philippines, or UP. He kept mum on whether Cancino left the team on his own terms or he was actually removed. He also refused to comment on reports regarding an ill-advised training bubble that he was believed to have put up in his hometown in Sorsogon. The alleged rift between Ayo and Cancino stemmed from the reported bubble. The incident is under investigation by UST and the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases. Ayo meanwhile expressed hope that the government would find ways to effectively address the pandemic so that everyone may resume a certain normalcy and return to enjoying basketball. A charity volunteer in Cagayan Province has been named finalist in Hong Kong's 2020 Volunteer Movement Award. Project Lapis organizer Herson Raquinho was named finalist by the award-giving body. He was bronze awardee for the Individual Volunteer Award last year in the same organization. Through the Project Lapis program, Raquinho distributed school supplies and snacks to indigenous children in far-flung Mabuno village in Gataran, Cagayan, from August 17 to 21. He also joined the distribution of relief packs to villagers and a Bayanihan sa barangay medical dental mission. Last month, Raquinho's project also teamed up with police to give 300 Agta villagers free school supplies, snacks, and relief packs in Sitio Panao, Tabak, Bugay, Cagayan. Each year, gold, silver, and bronze awards are given to committed individuals or groups to encourage volunteerism and recognizing their services. Let's take another look at today's biggest stories. The Senate assures a hiring of health workers and contact tracers and other benefits under Bayanihan 2 Act. Defense Chief Delfin Lorenzana rebuffs China's claims that the Philippines is causing provocations in the West Philippine Sea. Rescuers continue to search for 3 fishermen lost at sea in Batanes. And a charity volunteer in Cagayan province is named a finalist in Hong Kong's 2020 Volunteer Movement Award. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, check our webpage or head into the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags on all our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know from the PNA Newsroom. I am Rom Dulfo. Good day and keep safe.